Hi there, it's John Coombs here. I just want to share some of the knowledge that I've been able to gain over the last 60, 70 years. A lot of the work I've done in recent years has been director of a health clinic, worked with over 11,000 people, and everything from people with terminal cancer through to world champion athletes and all black captains and things like that. So one of the things I want to talk about today very much is around this issue of human potentiality and the opportunity for humans to become so much more than they could ever begin to realize, and for lots of people to become like that, and for us to help reform and restructure and rehabilitate the way we as people interact with our planet and our ecology so that we can help to grow a more healthy and productive world, a more productive worldview. One of the things that concerns me the most is the lack of confidence people have in the future, especially younger people. The amount of anxiety that's in society, the amount of nervous overload, ADHD, overwhelm, fatigue. These are all preventable. They're symptoms of something else. They're symptoms of us not being healthy, not knowing how to eat the certain right foods, not knowing even how to eat the food, because most people I've ever met in my life wolf food as though they're a wolf. They eat far too quickly, they don't chew properly. But a human being has a 10-meter long interface between the food going in and the waste products coming out. In other words, the gut, the intestines, the stomach, the esophagus and whatnot. It's 10 meters. A lot of twisting and turning, a lot of valves, a lot going on inside this particular gut and intestinal region. And if we don't chew our food properly, we don't get enough saliva mixed together with the food. Think of it like a concrete mixer, mixing saliva in with the food, mixing it all together before it goes into the stomach, which is an acid bath. So the stomach's extremely acidic. It could break down a ball bearing if it's left in there long enough. But it's got valves, so the acids tend to stay in the stomach, and then the food goes into the intestines and eventually out the colon. The waste comes out the colon. So there's a huge and tremendous amount of activity going in there. If we get the first stage of that wrong by not chewing properly and mixing the saliva in with the food, we're almost certainly not going to be able to digest our food properly. In other words, we're wasting a lot of the food, we're wasting a lot of our time, the time involved in buying the food, somebody growing it, packaging it, all that goes, unwrapping it when you get the food home. All the effort's gone to producing this food, all the ecological and environmental damage from growing food and the way we grow it and transporting. And we've just gone and wasted all of that potential energy simply by not chewing the food properly. Then we've created a health problem for ourselves, and that health problem then creates an ongoing problem for society. Because instead of us being highly productive and energized and enthusiastic and confident, we become weighed down by life. So there's just one simple tip to start with. There's so much more to this though. What happens when we take food and air and liquid into our body is that this, again, as I was saying before, it gets mixed together in certain ways. Enzymes come in, not just enzymes in the saliva, but enzymes throughout the gut and intestinal region. Their job is to break down the food from simple nutrients and convert that into something incredibly complex like a human ecosystem. Human nervous system full of proteins, human hormones full of proteins and essential fatty acids that are being mixed together in certain ways by these enzymes. A human DNA system, an extremely complex DNA system, again full of proteins carrying electrical signals. Human musculoskeletal system, again, look at the things that we as human beings do. We completely take it for granted. We're doing the most complicated things every single day, from using technology that no other animal we know on the planet can do, driving cars at very high speeds, very close to each other, driving in ways that would have been totally impossible 100 years ago. And we're not only doing these extremely complicated things, but we're doing it so often, like, for example, using computers and cell phones. Takes a tremendous amount of brain power to use a computer, especially something like a cell phone. Cell phone is a tiny computer with a tiny screen, and somehow we have to get our eyes, which are part of our brain, to decipher all the information through the pixels on a screen. So we tend to be sort of squinting or sort of straining our eyes, which is straining our brain just to read it. Then we're typing onto it. And we're often doing very complicated things on our phone, reading complicated literature and typing complicated notes and letters and whatnot. emails and reading emails. Now, that takes a lot of nervous energy. It takes a lot of brain power. So we're using our brains more and more and more every single day, but we're not always getting more from the use of our brain. In other words, a lot of what we do is not particularly good for us. We're reading stuff that's not good for us. We're writing stuff that's not particularly good for the world. In other words, it's not constructive, a lot of what we're tiring ourselves out doing. And I'm just talking about media stuff right now. I'm not talking about all the other things, but just the way we tire ourselves out doing things that we don't always even enjoy doing, but we're almost addicted to doing, because most people I know are addicted to screens, and they're tiring themselves out on these screens doing things that they often don't even really enjoy, and they're living like an addict. So I've got grandchildren who are completely addicted to screens at a very, very young age, and we of course try to reduce the screen activity, but because they're grandchildren, not children, we don't have the full influence over how they live. So these addictions are forming very early in life. Now, why addictions are so normal for people, and most people don't even know when they're addicted. Workaholism is the biggest addiction in the world, and probably screens have overtaken that now. Why we don't even know we're addicted is because our brain likes habits. It likes to build ruts and simplify process to get from one place to the next, because 95% of our brain activity is subconscious. So if we want to reach our potential and become the person we really would most like to be, we have to build good habits, not lazy habits, or not build unhealthy habits we often don't even know we have. Because if 95% of our brain is subconscious, it means it's already gone through some sort of conscious process and then being stored in the back of the brain as a faculty that we can use when we need to, like driving a car. We don't think about driving a car once we've learned how to do it. We just jump in and do it. We don't think about walking once we know how to do it. We just walk. But anybody who's had children knows how hard it is for a child to learn how to walk and then skip and jump and run. But as adults, we just do those spontaneously, automatically or autonomically, because of our subconscious and the way we've built these habits and faculties that we just copy and paste or replay. So these habits are really good for us if they're good habits. But if they're not good habits, they can very quickly become an addiction, like workaholism becomes an addiction, and it's an extremely common addiction. People who can't unwind and rest and restore their body and rehabilitate their nervous system and their hormones and sleep properly and wake up the next day fresh and enthusiastic. So can you see that what could otherwise be good for us becomes harmful for us? As our habits become less than ideal, they become fundamentally bad habits and they become addictions. So the average person would look at it, for example, a methamphetamine addict, and say, what the heck are you doing with your life? But not find it easy to look in the mirror with their own screen addiction or their own workaholism addiction or their own stress addiction. I had a stress addiction for a long time without even knowing I had it. I was just hooked on the buzz of the stress, and it was like a drug for me. And just every day I'd be packing my life with so much information, so much activity, so much buzz, but all I was doing was draining myself, burning myself out, burning out my nerves, burning out my hormones. And therefore I couldn't digest my food properly. I couldn't, because of the stress. I couldn't build good habits because I was so addicted to my existing poor or bad habits. So it's not like I'm saying these are easy things to achieve. They're usually not that easy to achieve. They take tremendous discipline. They take dedication, they take a lot of initiative. And usually we need to be taught a lot of this. Now the problem with that is, in coming to the education system in a minute, is that 80% of our diseases, based on the study, the modern biological and medical study of epigenetics, 80% of our diseases form in the first 7 years of our life. It's a similar system to what the Jesuits would say, give us a child to the age of 7, we'll give you the adult. In other words, what we train into the child before they're 7 plays out through the subconscious as an adult. Now, most of us can only remember very small amounts of the first 7 years of our life. We'll remember highlights and we'll remember lowlights, but most of it just becomes a haze. As the subconscious stores all this information, all these habits and these behaviors, and it's like anybody who stores things, you've got to be able to find it, like a filing cabinet. Well, where did I leave it in the filing cabinet? We don't always know. It's just buried deep inside, and it's only by doing some of the regression therapies or people doing a lot of meditation or mindfulness that they can start to become more self-aware or self-realized of what's truly going on inside their own brain, their own nervous system, their own behaviors, their own habits. So The beauty of this is a good habit is probably just as hard to break as a bad habit. So we can grow and develop and build these good habits, especially when we're young. We stick to those habits. We like the feeling that those habits give us, just like an alcoholic likes the feeling of alcohol every day. And if they don't have that feeling of alcohol, they start to feel moody or grumpy or agitated or irritated. Same with tobacco. But a good habit can also give us these feelings. And if we build a whole raft of good habits, this is extremely good for our self-confidence, extremely good for our motivation, extremely good for us to reach our potential. And we know from some of the extremely high achievers in the world in various fields just how high some people can elevate themselves, their habits, their beliefs, their behaviours, push their bodies through the most extreme athletic performances, work and achieve outcomes at levels that other people can only dream of. And then, of course, over thousands of years, we've had various prophets who have left tremendously good recommendations and advice behind, the Buddhas of the world, the Christs of the world, the Pythagoras's, the Platos, the Gandhis, the Mandelas of the world, who have really, with the legacy of their life and their discipline and the learnings they've had, left the world a much better place. So what does it take to reach our high potential? Firstly, we need to be putting the right information into our mind, the right programs, the right attitudes, the right beliefs, because they make such a difference to our levels of energy. We know from the work with crystallized water that the difference between structured water and bulk water could be as much as 40,000 times the energy differential. Now, Marcel Vogel, who was a very famous doctoral degree crystallographer who developed the early stages of the silicon chip for IBM right back in the beginning of the IT world, was a crystallographer who was also looking at crystals like water crystals, ice. He basically is saying you can barely compare these as the same substance. We call them both water, but one would have 40,000 times the energy potential of bulk water. In other words, not even a similar substance on some basic level. Now, if I was to say to most of the people that come to the clinic, I can show you a way of having 4 times as much energy, most people would be jumping up and down and lining up and saying, great, I'd like some of that. If I said to most people, I can help you achieve 40,000 times, they would tend to be skeptical. They would tend to think, oh, well, I don't really believe that. I've never experienced it. I don't think that you're talking truth, or I don't think there's some proper rational science behind that. So can you see that we become skeptical of the things that could help us the most, and we become defeatist of our own potential simply by our skepticism or our lack of confidence or our lack of education or our lack of scientific understanding? So structured water comes from places like Lourdes and holy sites. All waters have been blessed by people who have got good skills with gratitude and forgiveness and compassion. So this is something monks are trained to do. And all over the world, monks are looking to bless water or bless people to help enhance the outcome. So we can freeze this water and look at the different structure. And the structure is just so different from water that's been blessed to water that hasn't been. Water from the tap. We've done this from our own clinic, and we've taken water from the kitchen tap, frozen it, and it just looks completely destructured. It almost looks like a normal one-coloured carpet. Just fibres that aren't developed into a coherence. As opposed to if we structure that water with certain attributes, it starts to look like a biological formation. It could look like a coherent leaf system or a fern system. It starts to take on a structure that is what biology is, a process of structure based on the water molecule. Water is called the staff of life. Water becomes blood. Water becomes lymphatic fluids. Water becomes the substance in between the cells. It becomes a substance inside the cells. And water, having the special quality it has, this neutral quality, it's capable of absorbing information. It's capable of absorbing energy. It's capable of absorbing chemical information. So it absorbs nutrients and they become blood. It absorbs thoughts and they can change the structure of the water itself if we freeze it. They can lead to a change in the acidity or the alkalinity. And the problem most people have with their health is the wrong parts of their body become acidic. So they become stiff, sore. They could end up with arthritis and think, well, it's just normal, I've got arthritis because I'm a certain age. No, that's not true at all. You have arthritis because the structure of your body's breaking down and you're acidic in the wrong areas and you don't have enough alkalinity in your blood often. Blood should ideally be alkaline, so should the gut. But if you're acidic in your gut or acidic in your blood, just imagine that's the same as putting lemon juice in your eye. It's going to create an agitation or an irritation. If you put enough of it in for long enough, you can imagine it's going to create something that could be like an arthritis or an osteoporosis or a lot of other symptoms which we call diseases. So 98% of the molecules in your body are or were water. That's 98%. In terms of the mass, it's anywhere between about 50 and plus 60% of the water. Of the mass is water. Water, as I've said earlier on, has these special properties. It can absorb a lot more energy than people realize through special qualities, or it can become acidic. So it has this potential to follow the architecture of the environment it's in. So we know from doing live blood tests that people's blood can change in an hour from looking like sticky raisins, which is obviously going to cause a lot of problems to your health if you have to pump sticky raisin-like blood, unstructured. It definitely doesn't look like a ball bearing, which is what the blood ideally would look like, so it can travel through all the blood vessels nice and easily. But we can help that blood change from being like a raisin, which is a sugary, sticky coating, to like a grape, which is a much more coherent and symmetrical structure with a nice thin coating of oil around it. You see the difference that can happen very, very quickly with our blood. It can go both ways. It can become less structured or it can become more structured according to the environment. One of the reasons for that is the qualities of water I've been talking about and the fact that blood at a chemical level is 93% water. What else is blood? Well, there's nutrients in the blood, but there's also a form of plasma. And scientists for a long time now have been trying to understand what is plasma. Well, we know the sun produces plasma, and the last 2 years a lot of people have been quite disoriented with the sun being so active, all the plasma flares or solar flares, and they've been putting up billions of tons of plasma towards the planet with all this extra energy that people aren't used to. They're not used to handling that extra energy. So blood is a combination of mainly water, plasma, which let's just call that an energy system, and nutrition to feed our cells. As I said earlier on, the blood can change quite quickly inside an hour from being healthy to unhealthy if we're getting sick with the wrong nutrients or the wrong thoughts and attitudes, or becoming far more well by radically changing the thoughts and attitudes and the way we feel through process of mindfulness or meditation. So we're not just recommending meditation because it helps you feel better at a mental emotional level or at a more spiritual level. We're recommending meditation which becomes a habit because it literally changes the physiology of your body, and we can measure that quite quickly with some of the machines that we have and some of the microscopes we have. We know that through crystallography, the work of Masaru Emoto, Vader Austin, Marcel Vogel, Konstantin Korotov, that this is true. These are people who spend a lifetime studying water. We know it from the fact that the water becomes a biological system in many cases, in our case a human biological system, and we can very quickly measure the influence on the blood, or how do I feel? Because a lot of health is about feelings. How do I feel? Do I feel more energetic? Yes. Good, it's working. Do I feel happier? Yes. Good, it's working. Do I feel more enthusiastic and confident about the future? Yes, it's working. This is not rocket science. This is just common sense and cause and effect. So a lot of what we do with our work, our clinical work and our coaching and the advice we give, it's extremely common sense. But so many people in the modern world want life to be more spectacular than common sense. They're after like quick fixes and they don't always realize just how important it is to have these habits, to build these attitudes, to build these beliefs, to really maintain a strict discipline as much as possible around how we think, what we think about, what we believe, how we manage our beliefs, what our attitudes are, how we manage our attitudes. And again, as I said, by measuring blood, by measuring how we feel, or by measuring water crystals, they're just simple, easy, common sense ways of measuring a before and after. So, what structures water the most? And how long does it take to structure it? Well, compassion or love is a guarantee. Over and over and over again, people are doing this research and seeing a change in the structure of the water crystal. Over and over again, they're looking at the energy potential of the water and seeing it radically improve. Second one is gratitude or appreciation. What does that mean? Well, people who have a gratitude of life and an appreciation of the life and the world they live in, they definitely feel better. They definitely have a better life than people who have the opposite attitude. How long does it take to retrain ourselves from having a negative or a cynical attitude to a positive and a constructive and an appreciative attitude? Well, that's up to us, but the more effort we put in, the more discipline, the more we understand how important it is as a cause and effect to our health and well-being, our future, the future of our children, the future of further generations, the quicker we're more likely to embrace this. But as I mentioned earlier, it becomes a habit and a discipline. It's something we have to work at and train at. Now, something that's interested me a whole life, for well over 60 years now, I've been really interested in sport and high performance sport. If you look at a lot of the top athletes through different sports, as you say, soccer, tennis, basketball, all big international sports with billions of people following this and interested in this. Look at, say, 3 of the athletes that have been at the top for 20 years. Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, Novak Djokovic. These are people who are often considered to be the GOATs, if not in the top few in their field. What do they all have in common? It's a very high level of self-belief, a very high level of discipline. They spend a lot of money and put a lot of effort into their health and well-being. And by that I don't just mean the nutrition, because they do put a lot into their nutrition. They put a lot of effort into their attitudes and their beliefs. They all show a lot of gratitude and appreciation of their life, the gifts they have. They'll often have almost a religious feeling about this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be religious. It's just that they have a respect for the gifts that they've been blessed with, a respect and a gratitude for the people who support them, their family, their coaches, their support teams, the fellow players that they're involved with, in many cases their opponents. You look at the interviews these people have when they're being interviewed after or before a game, there's an enormous amount of respect that they show for life in general, for the discipline that it takes to reach the top and stay there, for the other people in the world that they live, and for the world in general. They all have academies or foundations helping young people. They're all really motivated by inspiring young people. And Ronaldo grew up in a tin shed. His father died when he was a young boy of heavy addictions. He had a heart operation, probably was about 12 or 13. He really had to work hard. He knows how to look after his health, and you have to take one look at him to see that. You have to take one look at him running around a football field, doing some of the special things. He does to know that. But every day he's putting the effort in. Another thing they have in common is they work harder than most people would even begin. You need to work to succeed. So they have built the type of habits of attitude, of gratitude, of nutrition, of exercise, of rest and recuperation, of managing healthy relationships as best as they can. They all have family lives. They all have children they love and respect. They all show a lot of respect for their parents, the help that they got from their parents to get to where they got to. And you start to see some common trends here. These are trends that also are shown by the prophets, the Jesuses and the Buddhas of the world, who are also teaching the same type of thing. So whether you want to be the strongest or the fastest or the most successful athlete, or whether you want to be someone who maybe takes a more spiritual approach to life, and I'm not saying the athletes don't take a spiritual approach, but some people don't want to be athletes. They don't want to have that type of life. They want a more, let's just call it a more spiritual life. It's the same qualities that apply. People like Jesus very much who was part of an Essene movement. It was around really high quality food, sprouted Essene bread. You know, bringing the energy out of the seed and sprouting the seed and potentizing that. So we know, let's just the biggest trees in the world or the biggest whales in the world, they come from a single seed. The potentiality in just a single seed, if you start to activate seeds, and as I've talked about before, the energetic qualities of water, once it starts to get potentized, that can go through a seed. So we know, again, from some of the research that we do, that some plants can grow so much faster than other plants if we charge the water up. We also know that some plants can get very sick quite quickly when that water has too much EMF or electrical information that's not healthy electrical information going into the water. The plants get sick. So we've got many before and afters involving this. We've got many examples of plants growing faster than normal. On average, about 30% easily increase in yield with more structured water. And that can be done in multiple different ways. But we know, for example, that wine can taste different, coffee can taste different, or even water can taste different after the water inside those gets structured by sound or light or attitude. So a lot of people have wanted to show respect for food. They say grace before food. That's a great idea. It was a lot more common when I was younger than it is now. As I say, people would sit around a table and there'd be a family ceremony with each evening meal. In many cases, there'd be a lot of respect for the food that we're about to eat. Thank you for the food I eat. That level of respect, that level of attitude and gratitude, as I've said, potentizes the water, not just in the food, but in our body. Because so many people I know are so concerned about the water in the cup or the glass or the bottle, and then completely ignore the water inside their own body. That's the most important part. What was in the cup, if we're going to drink it in our body, it's all very well blessing the water in the cup, but what about blessing our body? What about showing our body the respect that we would ideally most want our body to have by living the type of life that will enhance the outcome and the performance of our body? How many people are encouraged to do that? Problem we've got is so many people are feeling a little bit down, a little bit lacking in energy, a little bit lacking in confidence, not really understanding how easy this can be once we start to turn the corner, once we start to take the necessary steps in the right direction. The problem so many of us have, we're so busy looking out, we find it really hard to look in. Many of the answers most of us are looking for are inside. The most important relationship we fundamentally have is with ourselves. We have to spend our entire life with ourselves. That's a universal process. We don't like ourselves. It's going to be very hard to have a lot of like for other people or a like for the world. So this is just pretty fundamental issues, but it's so fundamental it gets missed with all the experts on this, that and the next thing, ice baths, red light therapy, all the other stuff that of course it's going to help. What's going to help the most? Having a really positive, respectful and gracious attitude to ourselves. You said that charges water up. It charges the water up in the cup. It charges the water up in our body. I've already said that water can carry as much as 40,000 times as much electrical potential when it has been blessed or infused with this type of energy, as opposed to just bulk water, to such an extent that it could barely even be considered the same substance, according to Dr. Marcel Vogel. So you start to see some of what I'm talking about might sound okay, well, yeah, that sounds pretty good, but no, it's not but. It sounds good. It works. We've tested and tried this over and over and over again with so many different people who have gone through the clinic. For us, our focus is very much on solutions. We're not problem solvers in this clinic. We're solution seeking. We don't really want to know too much about the problems other than, yes, we understand there's a problem. Yes, we understand there's a history to this. But the solutions are often so much easier than people could realize, and some of them I've been talking about now. I'm going to move just one step now to food. Food, of course, is mainly water. If you cremate a human person, get rid of the gas, get rid of the water, it's just a bit of ash left. That much ash from an average 70 kilo human being. The rest of it's the water or the liquid and the gas. It's the same with food. You dehydrate food, it shrinks right down to eventually right down to the minerals. So this water is important as food as well. It's important as the drinking, what we use for drinking to lubricate. It's important in the oil. So most of life we can call structured water. It has a mathematical formula which is regularly called the golden mean. It can also be called the Fibonacci series. That applies to DNA. It applies to the healthy structured water I'm talking about. With the water, it's very, very simple. There's a hydrogen and an oxygen. The length of the bond in structured water of the hydrogen expresses directly as the Fibonacci series, the golden mean, 1 to 1.618. Okay? The sequence is where you start to add the numbers on top of each other: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. You start to add these numbers up, and eventually you get to a stage where they're pretty much always about 1 to 1.618. The same in my finger. The length of the knuckle from there to there is the golden mean. Here, the length of this to this is the golden mean. In my knees, in my face. So what we call beauty or symmetry is what expresses this golden mean. And many of the great painters of the world, and especially, say, people like Leonardo da Vinci, of course they understood this. It's coded into their paintings. Why is the Mona Lisa such a famous painting? Because it is an archetype. He spent about 17 years finishing that painting. He didn't just paint it and pass it over. He carried it around for about 17 years, touching it up and trying to refine this so that it expressed these archetypes of what we call beauty or symmetry inside a painting. So our biology is, if we're healthy, is symmetry. If we're not healthy, we have broken down that symmetry. So in a DNA molecule, again, I think it's 34 angstrom to 21 angstrom, I think, the length compared to the width. So can you start to see how when we start to know this stuff, we can work with this? It's just like, say, Ronaldo or Djokovic or LeBron James. They're using a ball and they're trying to do something with that ball that's mathematically precise. Can you see the issue around mathematical precision? So if LeBron can put that ball through a hoop and then they win the trophy, their team's very happy, they earn all this extra money, everything that goes with that. Or Djokovic with the ball that he used, a tennis ball, or Ronaldo with a football. Mathematics is the universal language of biology. It's the universal language of star systems, planetary systems, the distance between the moon, the distance of the moon from the Earth itself. You look at an eclipse, there's a perfect symmetry between the moon and the sun. Sun's 150 million kilometers away, the moon's 400,000 kilometers away, and yet when they go into an eclipse, they're exactly the same symmetry. This world, this universe is so intelligent, so capable of bringing us enhanced lives, enhanced planetary experiences, enhanced health, enhanced energy, enhanced enthusiasm, because it's coded for success. We just need to learn some of the simple rules and principles behind this and then apply them and have the discipline to follow these attitudes, follow these beliefs, follow these scientific principles, follow these habits. Once we start to do that, it's called serendipity or synchronicity. We start to get into harmony with the way the universe is properly programmed or is programmed. There's so many ways we can explain or define this, and this knowledge has been around for a very, very, very long time. There are people who built advanced pyramids thousands of years ago that are extremely high technology with precise mathematics. These pyramids line up all throughout the world in grids, energy grids. Stonehenge lines up with a Great Pyramid. There's a matrix of energy around the world that we can now, with satellites, very easily start to see the alignment of these ancient buildings of these people who had the technology, had the knowledge to build these amazing structures, some of them involving 1,000-ton rocks or stones. The Great Pyramid is, I think from memory, 6 million stones and 500,000 stones and 6 million tons. So an average of over, I think, 2.3 tons per slab. So mathematically precise, lined up with Sirius, lined up with the Orion's belt, lined up with the North Pole, showing the dimensions of the relation between the Earth and the Moon, etc., etc. It's a 6 million ton encyclopedia. It's a 6 million ton database of mathematical information that helps us understand ourselves, the universe, our planet. These people didn't leave these buildings there by accident. They left them there to try and educate us. They left them there to try and help influence us positively to show us some of this maths, to show us some of this possibility, to show us how we can lighten up our life or lighten up stone and structure it in ways that's extremely mathematical. So I really just want to impress upon the people who are listening to this or want to share this, we can reach stages of potentiality so much beyond what the average person even could dream of with some of the processes I'm talking about, with some of the attitudes I'm talking about, with some of the nutritional systems I'm talking about. You have to have enough protein, you have to be able to digest the protein, you have to have enough fatty acids, you have to be able to metabolize the fatty acids. The fatty acids are just so important. A lot of your brain is fatty acids, your cells all need a nice coating of fatty acids, your skin has a coating of fatty acids, your hormones are metabolized very much out of fatty acids mixed together with proteins. Your DNA is protein, your nerves are protein, your muscles require protein, your enzymes are protein. Most people I test, and I've got metadata for over 2,500 people, most of the people I test have a protein and a fatty acid problem. Probably 60% have a hormone or an adrenal hormone. Many people have anxiety and emotional overload or trauma overload, which is going to affect their nervous system, therefore they'll have anxiety. Again, coming back to protein, if the nerves are not properly fed, we're tired, our nerves are going to be jangly, we're going to be irritated. That's because our nerves are not properly nourished. We need to rest and detox our brain.